and Carlton King, former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show that looks at the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations. But in reality, what we really do is look at geopolitics in the round, all of it. And in order to do this at a much better level, what I tend to have is my podcast wife on the show, Madam Firgas Esack. Now, the reason why I'm saying Madam is because I don't know if she actually tried to buy her ladyship from a certain Boris Johnson, and obviously she put enough money his way that he's made her now a madam or a lady or a dame or something like that. Fergus, how are you?
Do you know what? I mean, I feel like do you remember like back in the 90s when you could buy if you bought a bottle of whiskey you could buy like an acre of Jura or something. Right.
Absolutely. So you saw Boris and you gave him an acre's worth, did you? And now you are a dame. Is that what it was?
Exactly. I feel like there are probably bits of Jersey that I could be the lady of. I could. Absolutely. Anyway, right. So look, we could bounce back about all of this, right? But what I wanted to do was introduce our esteemed guest now. Yeah. Now, someone who knows a lot about podcasts told us when we first started this podcast never to get more than 2 people on the podcast.
This is true.
And we went, forget.
Don't worry about it.
No. We said his line of thinking was sort of like Brecht and the fourth wall thing.
Absolutely.
Right. He sort of said, you're going against all the sort of podcast normalities and all the rest of it, convention and all the rest of it. But we, I think, have nailed it because the menage a trois thing that we've now got going on with.
We love that. Well, I do anyway. But please carry on.
Works. It totally works. But I am even more proud that today the menage a trois involves Dr. Rachel Taylor, because you and I, over the last 3 or 4 episodes, have probably referenced / misquoted Dr. Rachel.
On a couple of occasions, very true.
Probably I'm the most guilty. I've probably said like loads of times, oh yeah, Dr. Rachel said this, oh Dr. Rachel said that, right, blah, blah, blah. So it is an honour and a privilege to actually have the real, in the life, in the flesh, Dr. Rachel on this podcast.
Absolutely. Esteemed Dr. Rachel, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I feel like the build-up's been a bit much, and I'm sort of sat here a little bit sweltery and thinking I don't actually look or feel very esteemed right now.
I'm sure you do. And it can never be too much for a fellow Northerner, I must add. Sorry about that. I've got to throw that one in, Fergus. You know that.
That's fine. You guys can be as northern as you want, right? But let's before we just like, you know, talk to the ends of the earth. And we had a double-barreled episode where Carlton laid down the gauntlet talking about the gender gap. Right, Carlton laid down the gauntlet for the first episode. I then came on for the second episode. To be honest, I was pretty bloody knackered on the second episode. But I referenced a lot of your thoughts. We spoke a lot on my episode about the menopause and the white paper that DAPS is about to deliver with some critical thinking about the menopause. But what Carlton was suggesting, and I think this is actually very topical and insightful, is that we talk about the menopause, because that's a thing.
Well, first and foremost, what I wanted to ask Dr. Rachel is, do you recognise that as a thing?
It's certainly recognised as a thing. It's not called a menopause. It's called an andropause.
Sorry, can you say that again? An andropause, yeah?
Andropause, yeah. And it's really interesting because it's recognised. It's a term that's used to describe sort of the lowering of testosterone in a man. However, up to date, there's not enough research done on it at all.
Right.
So you have like small scale studies, you have certain pockets of different sort of clinical population of men, but there is absolutely nothing, and there's very little awareness or education out there about it for anybody, let alone men.
Right.
But it's so funny because, like, as podcast wife to Carlton, right, I was so proud of him this week, right, because he said to me, normally I pick the topics, and he said to me this week, he said, "Oh, should we talk about Philip Schofield?" And I was like, "Oh, proud wife, right?" Normally we just talk about geopolitics and international wars and stuff like that, right? But I don't know if you watched the press conference, but there's a very real part of me emotionally that thinks that Philip Schofield is probably going to take his own life. But to circle back, we work with a company that's very aligned with the Samaritans, and there's a much higher percentage of, like essentially, I think it's like 22%. The most volatile male percentage for suicide is sort of between 45 and 54. It's that age gap, but it's something like a fifth of the male population, right? But in the landscape of menopause, I mean, I'm not being sort of flippant about giving it that name, but what we need to do really is we need to talk about what's the problem here, and obviously the problem is, I would personally say that are a lot of male suicides, and the problem, like, Philip Schofield is obviously an extreme end of the spectrum, but just have that on your radar, Secondly, what's the solution? Because women have fought and now gotten to the point where HRT is affordable for the menopause, for better or for worse. And Dr. Rachel will pick me up on this in a minute, right, for better or for worse. But what do men do, and what should they be doing, and what should they be asking for? Look, okay, the NHS actually defines the menopause, right? They actually define the menopause, right? They say some men develop depression, loss of sex drive, erectile dysfunction, and physical and emotional symptoms when they reach their late 40s and early 50s. Other symptoms include mood swings and irritability, loss of muscle mass, fat redistribution, general lack of enthusiasm or energy, difficulty sleeping, poor concentration, right? All I say, because I'm going to give the floor completely back to Dr. Rachel in a second, right? I'm going to completely give the floor back to her. That there's no formal process the NHS have identified this, but there's no process.
Yeah, let me jump in there just before Dr. Rachel comes in, because I want Dr. Rachel to actually nigh on take over the programme, because it's very, very important. No, it's very, very important, because I think you can add to that night sweats, etc. Now, the reason why I wanted to speak about, I've forgotten his name. Schofield. That's right. Sorry. You see, this is another fact of the male menopause. I can't remember stuff. With Philip Schofield was because also I wanted to highlight that I believe that you have a guy whose job it is to basically read an auto cue, and because he has a relationship with a younger guy who said, as far as I understand it, and I've not heard anything to the contrary, that the man did nothing to me whilst I was underage. Nothing at all. So he reads an auto cue, that's all he does, he's a TV host, and all of a sudden it's the biggest thing since the world fell down. Yet, on the other side of this arena, we have prime ministers, several of them, who have at least not put their full strength behind looking at the levels of corruption, one prime minister in particular, in the United Kingdom that is not laughable. You know, we have between, this is the government's own accounting figures, between 35,000 million and 49,000 million pounds gone missing under Johnson and then under Truss, and the present Prime Minister, and most of it's gone missing by opportunities given to Tory ministers, Tory MPs, Tory donors, and people in the House of Lords who are all Tory orientated. This money's gone missing, and the present Prime Minister says we will not investigate.
Well, do you know what, Carlton, right? Wouldn't it be great if Dr. Rachel can ring fence the fact that over a certain age, like men have the menopause whereby they actually shouldn't be making these governmental decisions, and actually,
Absolutely.
and actually, with all everything that we've spoken about on the last 6 episodes, where we could just like delete all the Johnson and Dominic Cummings and Rishi Sunak and, you know, whatever conversations. Yeah. We could just get rid of them all. And even, I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, I know you and I are on the same page, and actually I know Dr. Rachel's on the same page as us about Prince Harry, right? Because I know we're all very much pro Prince Harry, right? And about how he's finding his way to get his emotions out into the public, and that's a positive thing, even though the media is shooting him down for making it a positive thing. I know we're all on the same page for that, but even if we just looked at that as a menopause thing, you know.
Yeah.
Dr. Rachel, it's open to you.
Well, it's really interesting when you're talking, you know, about, you know, you couldn't remember Philip Schofield's name, because of all the hormones that are in your body, testosterone is the one that is most highly associated with memory problems. And because of how everybody is living, often sort of low levels of testosterone are apparent even before men are coming to an age where it naturally tails off. And something else that's really interesting as well, that if a man is sharing care of a child, so he's doing more, you know, sort of 50% or more of the share of a child, his testosterone will naturally drop off as well. So he becomes a better caregiver.
Seriously,
yeah. This is scientific fact. Yeah.
Incredible.
So it's like, you know, there's so much that is known about testosterone and so much that isn't known about testosterone, and you have to sort of look at how we live as human beings. And
so are
we
you
live
then saying, sorry, I've got to look at this point because you just said that. Are you saying that what we're doing, particularly in the Western world, I know it's happening in some other parts of the world, but particularly in the Western world, what you seem to be telling me is that we are emasculating men?
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah, and it's like, you know, and it's really interesting because I know that you know, at the very start we were saying that, you know, you talk about things that, you know, are challenging for people, and sometimes you do things in a way that's not like everything else. Well, I'm the kind of scientist who actually speaks the truth, even if that truth is not what people really want to hear. You know, especially around sort of the gender and inequalities and everything like that, is because just because we want something to be a certain way doesn't mean that it's practical. And we have to sort of look and deconstruct in why we want something to be like, you know, I'm not really that much of a fan of, you know, equality. You know, I'm just not, because we can't, you're comparing apples with pears all the time. Yes. And especially, it really interestingly, before I came on to this recording, I have a son and he has 2 sisters. And I said to him, what makes you a boy? And he went, well, because I'm not a girl. And I went, but what makes you a boy? And the first thing that he said, and this mirrors all the other research that's out there, what society have sort of conditioned people to say, what makes a boy is a genitalia. That's what makes you a boy. Mm-hmm. Genitalia. And then you know, but trying to sort of explore some of that, and it's like, this is what we have sort of what, you know, the societal norms and the societal conditioning, and then we have biological facts. You know, and we know these things, that if you are and it makes sense, Carlton. It makes sense. If you are caring for a baby or a small child, or moving into, you know, that child growing up, you know, into teenage years, you would need to be a caregiver. And it's a biological fact. To be a caregiver, you do not need testosterone. You need estrogen and you need lots of oxytocin. That's what makes you a caregiver. And that's, you know, that might be an, you know, like an inconvenient truth for many people, but it's, you know, it's been researched and it's a proven fact.
Do you know what though? Great. I mean, you know, I'll preface this by saying that my children have benefited so much from your wisdom. You know, I mean, as a mother of 4, I laugh in the face of health visitors trying to give me parenting advice, but I will happily and gratefully accept Dr. Rachel's parenting advice, and it's really you know, it's been game changing for my children. So I would say that Dr. Rachel does actually have a parenting course that you can sign up for, and if you email her, we can drop the details in the you know, like in the chat. But my kids, when you were saying about what you were saying about the gender fluidity, I've got 4 boys. My eldest is 11 and he's obsessed with bright pink. Like it's in a punk way. Punk way. He's obsessed with bright pink. He wants to have bright pink socks. He wants to have bright pink hair. In a punk way, right? My 9-year-old, I mean, he's obsessed with ballet and, you know, dancing and theatre performance and all the rest. And to be honest, like, he keeps saying to me, he says, Mummy, if I can just be like in the chorus line in the West End.
Bless him.
And I'm like, do you not want to be a main part? And he's just like, if I can just be in the chorus line. but you know, so his interpretation of pink is a sort of a different way. All my boys, every single one of my boys, right, is quite into pink but they sort of relate to it in an interesting way. So we never do the kind of gender thing, right? But my eldest, my 11-year-old, right, he obviously has peers who do say, oh, this is for pink's for girls, blue for boys or whatever, right? And Wild is very, very, very much into, you know, he wants to make that sort of statement. So I think it's interesting in the landscape of the sort of menopause thing about how much is self-created and how much is societally created.
Yeah, but let me just jump in. I said I was going to give it all to Dr. Rachel, and I am. I don't think the colour is particularly anything of any great interest. I think that is a total societal aspect which we have created rather than an actual perspective as to whether you're male or female. Because I imagine in other countries, that colour pink means absolutely nothing as to whether you're a boy or a girl. So I wouldn't think the colour pink has any real reflection on anything.
The thing is, like, you know, with colours and toys and things like that, that children generally sort of, they don't see things as different genders. They generally play with what they want to play, and it's the adults around them who make it an issue.
Yeah.
It's not the children. I was thinking when you talk about that, my little boy, he looks amazing in pink. I buy him a lot of pink and he likes that. And when he was younger, because he's got a sister who's much older than him, you know, she's 13 years older. When she was putting nail varnish on, he always has to have nail varnish on because he wanted to be like his sister, you know. So it's like, you know, the serious thing underlying all this, which is what you said with, you know, with the menopause, is that society is dictating that boys and men are a certain way, but boys and men are not like that. They, you know, they tend to suffer from more illness, both mental and physical. They tend to have more things genetically wrong with them. You know, male fetuses are twice as likely than female fetuses to be miscarried.
Interesting.
You know,
is that an actual stat? Yes.
Yeah, that is an actual stat. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Oh, Carlton, you know me. I will come.
Yeah, you're a stat woman. You're a stat woman. Absolutely. Brilliant.
And here's another stat that I was really shocked at, that I only found out today when I was like, I thought, right, I'm just going to have a quick look through the journals. And I never knew that one of the leading cause of death for 20 to 34-year-old males, like 13% is testicular cancer. Oh. And this is very much, you know, an issue within menopause, because obviously, you know, that's very much hormonally, you know, but 13%, you know, that's huge.
Yeah.
But then add on like the 22 point something % of male suicide.
And you know, exactly that. And it's like, you know, there's a societal drive that boys and men have to be a certain way. Well, boys are much more in need of emotional support than girls. You know, boys are born and they have an inability, for the two hemispheres don't communicate. They have to learn how to do that. Girls are born and they can do it straight away. The hemispheres are connected, so they already have a communication advantage. So, you know, boys need a lot more emotional support.
So what you're telling me, Dr. Rachel, so I've got to jump in here. Quite. What you're telling me is that from birth onwards, there are clear differences in male and female. Which is what we instinctively understand. Yeah. You know, I instinctively understand that, but the society is now trying to tell me something different. So, example, I'm a criminologist, okay? I know that the person most at threat of being murdered is a male. I know that, right? But the society is trying to tell me women are frightened of walking the street and can't do anything. Now, the reality is that men are frightened of walking the street. They are just not allowed to articulate they're frightened of walking down the street. Do you see what I mean? Because society says you're a coward to do so. So they don't say it. They're frightened of walking into a pub because they know, look at the person in the wrong way and you're going to end up in a fight and the possibility is you can be dead. Right? Yeah. Now, that isn't something that generally happens to females. But we're told in our society now that the female is under absolute and total threat, when I can tell you, if you look at the figures, I think the figures are like 7 to 1. So for every one female, it's 7 males. So he's murdered. So that's the reality.
But Carlton, I mean, like, I think like, you know, Dr. Rachel back me up, right? I live in rural Norfolk now, so I don't go out very often. But if I go out, I make sure that I've got the money for a cab in my purse, always, right? And I've always done this. That, you know, like from when I was like 15 years old. Like if I go out somewhere, I always make sure I've got the money to get a cab. If I need to get a cab home, I make sure I've got the money to get a cab in my purse, right? Because for women, it is a threat.
Oh, absolutely. But what I'm trying to say to you, it's a threat for men as well. They just don't. It's okay. Let me give you a better example, which you might be able to. And Dr. Rachel, I'd like you to come in on it, which you might be able to feel. A better example is this. I know of at least 3 women close in my family-ish, so extended family, my wife's family maybe, or friends thereof, or my sister-in-law, whatever. They say when they're driving, example, so my sister-in-law says, I don't want to drive on the motorway, so she won't drive on the motorway. Fair enough. Park it. It's there. Another, an auntie of my wife says she won't drive when it's raining, so she don't want to drive when it's raining. Park it there. Another one says, once it gets dark, I don't want to drive. Right? Now, I know men who all think probably the same, but they can't articulate it. Because the guys will say to them, what, you having a laugh, you? What, are you, you know, in the old terminology, are you soft in the head or something? Blah, 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 blah. So they have to get on with it. And what they then do is, because they get on with it, they just get kind of used to it. So they don't have the outer. And that's where it falls down. And if you think about it, you know, and this is what I want to ask Dr. Rachel too, if women do what men are doing, do they then get more testosterone? So, for example, you've got women in the army, okay? Now, in the old days, this is going to be a big problem for the state if we ever get to the situation where we need to bring people into war. In the First World War, the Second World War, when conscription was brought in, generally about 6 months after the war started, men got their papers, came through the door, and you had to report to go and fight. No woman got any papers. Wasn't handed out to women, right? Men had to fight. Indeed, in the First World War in particular, women used to go up to men who didn't fight and give them a white feather and say you're a coward, etc., 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 right? In a modern war scenario now, will women get their papers, their conscription papers?
Okay, so sorry, just to jump in on this really quickly, right? This weekend, right, I did all the driving. My husband is the worst passenger in a car.
Yeah.
He's terrible. Like, I mean, he just literally sat there with, like, you know, I kept saying, like, sweetheart, could you just move your arm because I can't see out the mirror? Terrible, right? But, you know, I said to him, my brain doesn't work the way your brain works. So I said, you would put your sat-nav on. My brain doesn't work like that. I need you to say, you know, let's drive to X point and then take the M25. Let's drive to X point. Let's take the M40. Let's try. I need you to tell me in words.
Okay, you need a co-pilot, basically.
I need a co-pilot, right?
Yeah.
And he explained it. And to be fair, he did a good job.
I'm not arguing that women can't drive. Listen, the world rally champion used to be a woman. That's not the point I'm making.
As a woman, I had to narrate. I had to tell him what I wanted and what I needed.
The point I'm making, Fergus, is it's an option. Women find it as an easier option to say, I can't do X, Y, and Z. So the question is, are we now moving to the point where men are happy to say, I can't do X, Y, and Z?
Well, it's not. But Carlton, it's not that I can't do it. It's not that women can't do X, Y, and Z.
Or wish not to do it.
It's not that women can't do X, Y, and Z. What I said to my husband, for example, on this 3-hour drive, I said, sweetheart, what I need from you is a navigator. I need you. I've got the 4 children in the car. I am driving. It's blistering heat. What I need you to do is navigate. And what I mean by navigation is 3 minutes before we need to take a left turn off X junction, I need you to tell me that we're taking that.
Because I accept that. That's not what I'm saying. What the people who I referenced are people who are saying they will not do X, Y, and Z on certain circumstances. My articulation was that the average man, in fact, any man that I knew of in any stage, it maybe would be different, which is why I'm asking Dr. Rachel, would never have said that, because they would feel that a man doesn't do that. That's the point. The society says a man cannot say that I cannot not do this. Rachel.
Well, the only thing that men can say in that sort of circumstance, the only thing that men can't say that they can't do are things that society say are jobs for women.
Yes, correct.
So that's it, so it's like, so it's like, in that respect, it's almost like the women you were sort of alluding to, they can say that because driving traditionally is part of a man's job. The man does that. And, women look after, and we're still there, and I upset feminists all the time because I say it's really disingenuous for them to say that women can have it all, because I said you're literally setting women up to fail and also to be really poorly post 50, because having it all is really difficult. Now, I'm going to say to you as a man, you don't want it all.
No.
What is all? What is all? And the thing, this is why, I do the work I do, because it's just, I explain to people, this is how your brain works. This is how your nervous system works. This is how the endocrine system works. And this is how it interacts with the environment. And I say that we all live in a very sick environment where there's very few people who are benefiting from how we are all living. The majority of us do not benefit in any way, shape or form, but we're convinced we are by media, by influencers, by people telling us that, if we're not succeeding, if we're not doing well, and this is for both men and women, then there's something wrong with you. Because then they'll point out the one person out of hundreds of millions who actually has been successful with all the adverse effects and all that. The point, and that's like, well, if they can do that, everybody can do it. And it's like, no, that's really wrong, because what about the 999 million who haven't?
Yes, correct.
Why is the exception the rule? Because it's not, and particularly when you're talking about sort of the things around sort of menopause, it's like we're medicalizing all the time things that are really natural, and the reason why it's affecting people more and more, because it is a process. It's not great to realize you're getting old, but aging shouldn't be a disease.
Real. Correct, it's real.
It's real.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't be a disease. Yeah. And the reason why it's made into a disease, and why men per se don't like to think there's anything wrong with them because of societal norms, so they're especially not going to want to think, I'm going through a menopause, this is affecting me, because it's medicalizing something. And equally, because of emasculation, as we've talked about before, and this is something, I don't use that word lightly. I see emasculation all the time. I have to pick it's really difficult, because obviously I have one boy and 2 girls, and it's like striking the balance between emasculation and misogyny in our house it's a very delicate balance, because you can see the influences. I can see how my little boy is very patronizing to his little sister about her playing sports, and I can see how she can break his balls for not getting an emotional thing right, or feeling emotional about something and not being able to articulate it. So it's a very fine balance. But if we didn't have all these influences, if society wasn't built in that we're all worshipping at the seat of success, and it's not even our success, it's somebody else's depiction of it, we wouldn't have most of the problems that we have. We're sort of battling in the harshest of environments and wondering why the body and the brain can't cope.
That's very, very interesting what you're saying, because the American football team, what was the lady called? And I've told you before that my name cannot really pick up on new names often. What was the lady called who was the captain of the team? And she was saying that she was only professional footballers, female professional footballers, were not getting the same salaries as male professional footballers, and that was wrong, and that they should get exactly the same salary. Now, the reality is, I don't know, and I could have been a professional footballer, by the way, I don't know of 2 professional footballers who earn the same salary. No. They don't. Yeah. Because their agent gets them what they can based on their talent and based on what they see is required. Now, in the World Cup, this is a stat which I found superb, actually. In the World Cup that has just gone, the average salary for that, and normally men don't get paid for playing for their national team, okay?
Yeah.
They get a little bit of sponsorship, but they don't really get paid like because they're already being paid if they're in the Premiership anyway in Britain, although obviously different leagues pay different amounts of money. So if you're playing in Morocco on the Moroccan team, or if you're playing in Fiji on the Fijian team, you're not going to make a living. But the point is, in relation to the West, they may make a living in relation to their own country. So the point is, salaries are vastly different. But what happens is that tournament made something like 20 billion, right? And the players got something like 5% of that 20 billion, right? The female tournament made something like, I believe I'm correct in saying, 125 million. And the female players got something like half of the salary.
Well,
so
exactly.
who is getting the right amount of money?
Look, at DAPS, like, we've got a client that analyses fan engagement and female football, like, is a huge conversation. Like honestly, it's a huge conversation. Like we it's probably another episode, but the point is that women have felt empowered to win when they kick a ball.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to previously, when it was like, okay, well, maybe, this can go on and then, right? But because we are now winning and owning, girls are positively motivated and empowered, and like I said, I think this may be another episode, but women's football has actually taken centre stage, really.
Really? No.
Yeah.
In terms of fans, no.
I really feel like it's taken centre stage.
But it's doing well. It's getting people in, but it's not getting in the 50, 60,000 fans every football match, which men's football is. Nor is it getting in the numbers watching it on the television, etc.
But from zero to nowhere, right? Like if you looked at Man United from where it came from to now, right? Women's football has built a fan base faster.
No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. This is the one place where you and I, Fergus, are going to have to disagree on that one, for the simple reason that if you look at Manchester United in the 1900s, right, they're getting 100,000 fans. Right. If anything, the fans base has dropped down, actually going to the game. Now, watching the TV, obviously, there's more and more people because TV's come about. But fans used to turn up at the game because it was cheap. Now, my father was a professional sportsman, and he could not make a living out of his sport. It was cricket. He could not make a living out of it. So it's not only that women couldn't make a living out of it. Men couldn't make a living out of the vast majority of sports which they played. Indeed, I said I could have been a professional. When my team came to sign me, I was 16 years of age. They wanted to sign me to play for my closest team, which was in the 3rd division. I turned it down to the consternation of my father. And I turned it down because I didn't think I could make a living out of it. And this was the 1970s, so 1973, something like that. So I turned down playing professional because I couldn't make a living. And the only way I would have been able to make a living is if I would have hung about and maybe made it to what was then the Premiership, called League Division 1. I never knew whether I could make League Division 1. Number one, I saw no black players in League Division 1 anyway. Well, there were 2 of them, 3 of them. But the point is, I never thought that I would ever make that. So therefore, I didn't take that on board. So sometimes games look as though it's a start, but it depends where you started. Now, female football is moving along leaps and bounds, but the female fans will have to turn out to watch it, as will the male fans, because only then will you get to the level whereby people turn around and say, you know what, female footy is great, and we all want to watch it, right? You've got to be there to force the money makers, because it's all about the money. The people making the money do not care what gender you are, as long as it makes money. And that's shown by American, I think basketball now, female basketball in America is very big because it makes money. That's all they're interested in.
Like, look at the Ryan Reynolds thing with Wrexham.
Yes, exactly. That proves my point perfectly.
Do you know, like, if there was if a celebrity bought a female
yes, absolutely
football team, then
Dr. Rachel, buy a team.
Well, unfortunately, Carlton, I am one of these people who don't consider money as a symbol of success. So I really don't fit into the 21st century Western society. I'm sort of looking beyond, when hopefully people will think there's more to life than how much money you've got, and actually look at, you know, how human beings are flourishing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. The thing is that this is what I wanted to ask as well, and because this is a fantastic discussion. And the reason why I wanted to ask as well, do you think, Dr. Rachel, that the reason why they are basically medicalising everything is because of they want to make money? So therefore they're turning around saying, you should not be this, you should not be that, and you've got this menopause and they've been badly treated, and hence we're going to do that because they want to make money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I spend my life telling people how to make themselves well without it costing a lot of money. But you know, the problem is that the influences around people are so strong. It's like I say to people all the time, there is no such thing as a magic pill. You know, but they're being sold it every single day. You know, let me assure you, I'm not going to say it on your show as well, I say it to everybody. If there is ever a magic pill, I will be the first person to take it, because I work so hard to be well. It's not easy amongst the environment that we live in. You know, so I will tell everybody if there's a magic pill. The problem is, everybody's told that there is one. There's a magic pill for this. There's a magic pill for that. And, you know, you can do certain things, but it's not going to cure everything. It's not. And then when that doesn't work, and everybody's told you, oh, this does work, it's amazing, it worked for me, and it doesn't work for you, you end up feeling like there's something even more wrong with you than before. And you go on this spiral where, and then, you know, the more that you think there's something wrong, the more that you medicalise yourself, then the easier it is for unscrupulous people. And when you talk about the NHS, everybody talks about it as if it's, this amazing organisation, and I don't want to detract. There is some really good work that's done, but you have to remember the conflict of interest that is apparent within all the board members who advise on NICE, who advise how people should be treated, who actually advise on sort of medical treatments, who okay certain procedures. You have to remember where their conflicts of interest are, because they all have them. And I think it's something like 86% of the funding for our agencies that actually decide what medicines that we get, 86% comes from Big Pharma.
Yes.
So it's big money to medicalise things. Absolutely, It's big money. You know, but there's certain doctors just like me who are really working hard saying not everything is a medical issue. I work with something called the biopsychosocial model. Is that most diseases, most conditions don't have a root biological cause. Right. You know, it's implicated, but actually there's a lot of psychology and a lot of sociology implicated as well, you know, and we need to get that right. There is no such thing as a magic pill, none whatsoever. I feel very passionate about that.
so do you see see in terms of what we're calling the manopause and the menopause, are you basically saying they're just natural and people should deal with it naturally?
I'm not saying everybody should do it, because, you know, this is a thing. If we're in a perfect world, you know, we would be dealing with natural progression in very much a different way. You know, even if you look at the other end of the spectrum, look at puberty and how that's being handled with a lot of children. You know, that's being medicalized a lot as well. You know, but so we don't live in that perfect world. So, for some people, they have such a stressful life. They have so many things going on. They have so many conditions that it would probably be nigh on impossible for them to have sort of a natural progression of things. But we have to take responsibility about how we're living. And, you know, I could speak to anybody, you know, in the 20s and 30s, and I could tell them how they're going to age. I could tell them what conditions they're going to start getting when they're 50, what their old age is going to look like, how many tablets they're going to be on by the time they're 60. You know, I could do that when somebody's 20, and it's not because I'm some sort of medium. It's that I can make a really good estimate of the model of that person's life based on how they live in their 20s, what some of the stresses are, you know. So it's not. I don't want to say to everybody should go natural, just suffer. You know, we don't want to suffer. You know.
No. But
at the end of the day, there are many things that people can do, you know, early on to ensure that they are going to have an easier transition. And again, you know, we said it before, aging is not a disease. So make sure you're not making it into one.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell me, what would you say you should be doing potentially, or general parameters, because everybody's different. Let's get that up first. General parameters about what one should be doing or what one could be doing at 20, which will mean that later on, you don't suffer too negatively, because we're all going to have some negative, but too negatively. What would you say?
Well, the one thing that everybody can do, and this is something that everybody can do, is actually connect with their body more. And actually, how am I feeling? How is my body feeling? Everybody can do it. But most people don't. Most people live in their brains, live in their heads. They're just so disconnected. You know, and actually realize that we are one whole system. And this is something else that, you know, sort of allopathic medicine, so the medicalization of everything, it puts us into parts. Well, we're not parts. You know, if something's wrong with one part of our body, there's going to be a knock-on effect in other parts of our body. And often the symptoms that we get are not the root of the problem. So we have to connect, and we have to, you know, sort of listen to what our body is telling us. And the things that we need to start doing in our 20s is like literally make sure that we are hydrated all the time. You know, it's like there's so much in sort of the literature, particularly for women, is that you need to look after your skin in your 20s. Otherwise, you'll look like an old hag in your 50s.
So that was part 1 of this week's Black Spy podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll have part 2 next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
More than a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.